people fool us, the people lie to us, the government betray us. They can lie, they can steal, they will not know. I said we tired with their lies, we tired with their promises that led us to all our damages. We tired with that speech they preach indeed, and now unique they deceive us. The thing we saw, it frustrate us. So why can't you lie? Why can't you steal? Why can't you allow the citizens to be? You see, we just tell you that why we vote tell you. But you fool us, you screw us, you use us and later on abuse us. So why? The government should lie. Why? But that's the question that we ask. They lie. The people fool us. The people lie to us. The government betray us. They betray us so much. I said they lie. The people fool us, the people lie to us, the government betray us. They can lie, they can steal, they will not to corrupt. No one to trust. My people, no one to hope on. Nobody. My hope that I have been broken. I'm telling you, brother. So where are the schools? Where are the roads? Where are the jobs that they say they could afford? But they're too selfish. The people tired with their rhetoric. People tired, they tired. You see the reason why we ask why the government betray. They have enough of time, but yeah, then stay they delay. People suffer. No work for people crying for hunger. Look at. Your vision and your mission, your intention to the nation, they poor. You got nothing to show. Nothing. So why? The government should lie. Why? But that's the question that we ask. They lie. The people fool us. The people lie to us. The government betray us. They betray us so much. They lie. The people fool us, the people lie to us, the government betray us. They can lie, they can steal, they will not corrupt.
Good afternoon. For some people, it's close to evening, right? Like 5 o'clock. Okay. Excuse me. For some reason, my throat is dry. This is Isaac Vatukpa. We started up a new series, Rebuild Liberia, and we believe that this should be something important to everybody in terms of how we really build our country, how we and everything. Today, I have with me Mr. George Kamo Famule, GK Famule. A friend of mine will go back now, 40-something years. Yeah. 46 years, just about. Most of those listening, probably our friendship is older than them. But I would just like you to introduce yourself, George. Let some people, I know most people already know you, but for the few that don't know you, please introduce yourself.
My name is George Fambule, and I'm I call myself a recovering software engineer, and I'm always recovering. And I currently own and run a medical practice in Arizona with my wife. And I think there are a lot of things we need to talk about regarding how we can put Liberia back on track. I'm just going to come out and say it.
There's no other way to do it when it's with you.
Yeah, we appreciate education. the problem that we lack in Liberia is structure. And it seems as if the educated people don't understand the value of structure. And that's where we're being harmed. So whichever topic you want to jump into, let's do that.
Right. So, folks, George is a diverse, how should I say, knowledge seeker. He will do the necessary research. You don't come to a discussion with George if you're not prepared. You got to understand your issues. Sometimes his temperament, he impatient with those who don't come informed. But we'll work with that.
I don't like stupid people. That's the long and short of it. That's the best way to qualify it.
We'll work with that because this show we expect to bring a lot of different experts on to work with us to inform our people, because this is really about how can we move from where we are today and move forward. So, George, in your perspective, how did we get here? How did we get where we are today?
Well, I believe we got here because we never really laid the foundation for growth to begin with. When we were in high school, Monrovia had about 200,000 people. The country had 1.5 million people. When you're using those types of numbers, you can get away with filing papers. When you're dealing with 1.5 million people in Monrovia, when you're dealing with 4.5 million people in the country, now you're talking about orders of magnitude. When I went to Liberia in 2007, and I was talking to government officials about the need to put in these computer systems and infrastructure, somebody said to me, that computer will eat. And I said to the person, I said, listen, you won't eat the computer, but the computer will make sure that you eat efficiently.
There you go.
And that's the difference.
So let me just ask you something you said earlier about growth, because, there's the issue of growth. And I'm assuming you meant that we're not preparing ourselves for our population growth. But there's also the issue of growth and development from an economic standpoint. So I was just trying to differentiate those two so people can understand.
Okay, so if you look at growth and development, I am a big disciple of Hernando de Soto.
Right.
Okay, de Soto wrote the book, The Mystery of Capital. Okay, why capitalism works in the West but doesn't work anywhere else. And the first time I read that book, I read it, as an economics book.
Okay.
No, he was talking about economics. And then I read the book again. And the central thing that comes through from de Soto's writing is the things that the people in the West take for granted that underpin their systems are simply not there in the other countries.
Fact.
So you can talk about your economy all you want. You can talk about capitalism all you want. But capitalism is actually built on the data systems that support it. And what de Soto has said over and over is, in the absence of those data systems, of record-keeping systems, you can't make any progress.
No,
and so
really?
if you look in the underdeveloped countries, he did a study about how long it took to transfer a title in Peru. It took about 7 years. A property transfer in Peru. It took about 7 years. He did a study about energy theft from the power company, running between 30 and 50%. Well, we have those same issues in Liberia.
Those very same issues.
And the difference between Peru in the United States is, or let's even use Liberia. If you want to buy a piece of property in the United States, you are not the person responsible to present the deed of ownership for the property. The government is in possession of that deed. And the government makes that deed available to the lenders. And on that deed, they not only can tell you who currently owns the property, they can also tell you what is owed on the property and who is owed on the property.
Right.
So any transfer of that property has to resolve any encumbrances on the property.
Right. Any liens, anything like that, any taxes,
exactly,
any outstanding items is there for
but
you.
It's a government maintained system that guarantees that the seller is protected, that the buyer is protected, but also guarantees that the government will collect its portion of the revenue for taxes on that transaction.
And that's going to be a major issue we'll talk about.
Okay. So let's talk about energy theft. You know, the big talk in Liberia right now is about LEC.
Right.
And LEC can't seem to be profitable. You know,
and that's a monopoly, George. That's a monopoly. Why can't it be profitable?
Okay, so here's the thing. Some esteemed Liberian economists have said that the way to make LEC profitable is to essentially allow third-party people to be providers of the electricity that they were supposedly purchased from LEC. Okay. Now, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Okay. And anybody who calls themselves an economist that comes up with something that stupid doesn't even need to be in the conversation, because what you're actually doing is you're simply transferring the troubles from LEC to private people.
To the private people. Well, question. Right. No system.
Okay, now, what is LEC's problem with property theft? They don't have a way to document who is stealing power and where the terminations are. Now, how is that different from where we live in the US? I'll tell you how it's different. In the US, there is a property record system that we talked about before. Every property is zoned.
Right.
Okay. There's a size of the property. Every house is rated. So, for example, the swimming pool in my background.
That's a nice background, as a matter of fact.
Well, thank you. When we had to fill that swimming pool, guess what? We had to call the water company and say, this month, we're going to use 25,000 gallons more of water because we're filling a swimming pool. Okay? When we talk about electricity consumption, anyone who lives in the United States can go and take a look at their electric bill.
Right.
And it will show on a monthly basis what your consumption is.
And they can go as far back as when they started you off, when they connected.
Exactly. I live in Arizona, and the hottest months in Arizona are from April to October. Well, if I look at my electric bill from the previous year, I can see what my expenditure was or what my consumption was for 2020. But in 2021, in July, my consumption dipped for about 2 weeks, significantly. Now, why did it dip? I can tell you why it dipped. Because we were gone for 2 weeks. There was nobody in the house. Okay? The point I'm making here is, if all of a sudden my neighbor connected to my house and started using my electricity,
it would pick up.
The electric company will call me and say, wait a minute. You only use X kilowatts over the last 3 years, every July. That's all you used. How come this month you're using 4 times as much. They're coming to check my connections. They're also calling the police. Because you know who tends to use a lot of electricity? People who are growing marijuana in their house.
Especially in Arizona, right?
Exactly. Okay. So the point is that LEC is losing all of these things because we don't have the infrastructure. Those underlying things that DeSoto talks about.
The fundamentals.
The fundamentals. We don't have the infrastructure to support LEC's mission. And it really doesn't matter what we do. Until we put that infrastructure in place, we are going to be a failed country.
Okay. So coming to that, because we got to discuss the whole RIA thing. So let's start off with the just the basic fundamentals at a high level of what we need in terms of being undergirding our system. I mean, what's at the bottom of the system? What is the foundation that we built on? So let's discuss that a little bit.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is Liberia is an energy deficient republic. Okay, our major source of energy from the national perspective comes from Mount Coffee. Mount Coffee costs $300 million. And it simply can't generate sufficient electricity to do the things that for the growth of the country.
No, it cannot.
It just can't do it.
Not consistently at all.
One of the major issues with
hydro?
Hydro, right. Well, there are 2 issues. There's an issue with the hydro, and there's an issue with how do you get the power from the hydro to where it needs to terminate. That's a transmission issue. Anytime you build localized power like that, and you have to transmit it 40, 50, 60, 100 miles, you're going to have to pay for the utility services to do that. And so if you look at the plan that came from Columbia University, I have a copy of that. It said that after the hydro was built, Liberia would need $3 billion to build the infrastructure. And I had a very serious discussion.
You mean the national infrastructure?
The national infrastructure to transmit the electricity.
Right.
Okay.
So you see the numbers, just the electricity component for national, transmission, distribution, everything, that's going to require $3 billion.
And that study came from Columbia University. I have a copy of the study. It was sent to me by the late Lawrence Randall, who he and I disagreed on many, many things. And as far back as 2014, I was saying to them, guess what? Rwanda built the first utility-sized solar plant in 2014, and it cost them $23.7 million to produce 8.5 megawatts of power.
And that was when it was expensive, because
exactly,
like you saw Boros put a little graph over there on a decrease per wattage over time for solar panels. So that 20-something million today for 8 watts is probably
you could get 10 or 11 megawatts.
Exactly. Or more. But go ahead.
So, so when you look at those types of things, you start to say, well, what is the advantage? So let's take a look at the $300 million that we supposedly spent on Mount Coffee. Let's use $30 million. How many of those power stations, those solar stations, could we build across Liberia for $30 million?
For $30 million?
For $300 million, we could have built 10. Easily.
We
could have built 10. Okay.
10 of them, that means that 30 million each. And I mean, minimum, that's about 15 to 20 megawatts we're talking about easily.
Oh, okay, so listen to this. Senegal just built a fabulous new soccer stadium. I mean, just it ranks with anything anywhere else in the world. What did Senegal do? They built a 3 megawatt solar plant to power the stadium. So let's think about what that actually means. The stadium's not used every day. The stadium is used mostly at night. So that means that they also got the storage capacity for the stadium, right? The batteries. But it also means that when those batteries are fully charged, that 3 megawatt of power that's being generated can be put back into the power grid. Okay? So let's come full circle to RIA. They want $23 million to solve the problem, the power problem at RIA. Okay? I would challenge anybody from the We Are government to prove to me that they are not trying to steal with this process, because in 2015, the lady who is currently the deputy manager for the Liberia Airport Authority for Technical Services, she went to the first solar airport in India to see what they were doing. And she said on the video that they want to do this in Liberia. This was in 2015. Now, let me tell you about this airport in India. This is the 7th busiest airport
in India. And it's the third for international flights.
Okay. The airport handles 10.2 million passengers a year. That's about 29,000 passengers every day. At its peak before the pandemic, RIA handled 100,000 passengers a year. That's 300 passengers a day. So this airport in India, right, handles more passengers in 3 days
than RIA in 1 year.
Than RIA handles in an entire year. But this airport built a solar plant for $10 million. And from the day they signed the contract to the day they turned the power on, it took them 6 months. 6 months.
And George, is doable. What we need at RIA is
so wait a minute now. I mean, I'm trying to get these numbers together now. Okay? You got an airport that handles less than 0.01% of the traffic of the airport in India, that is asking for 2.5 times the amount of money used to build the solar system for that same Indian airport. By the time RIA gets to 5,000 passengers a day, they'll be asking for 60 billion.
Easily. That's the math.
Okay? I mean, just do the math. So my question is this. If the government of Liberia knew enough about this airport in 2016 to send representatives there, how is it that in 2022, they are now coming up and saying we need $23 million?
And not somebody different. That's the thing. That same individual was on that video in coaching in India, discussing with the ladies how they would take back.
And she was on the video with Samuel Tway and them.
Then she was on this video with Samuel Tway recently and talking about, but you see, the government of Liberia is trying to confuse the people. Because instead of saying, let's solve this life problem, now they're crying about legacy issues, right? And what are those legacy issues? The apron? to be able to supposedly the ground not strong enough for the plane to get there.
Mhm.
The fire service. What is that a legacy issue that will cost you 23 million?
Right. Right. The main thing is you don't have electricity, and you are telling people, or you are telling airlines that they need to schedule their flight before midnight, because after midnight you will be dark.
But then again, the same Samuel Twain in that interview said there has never been an issue of light outage where the plane couldn't land. What happened with Air Morocco? Didn't Air Morocco divert the flight to Sierra Leone?
Right.
I mean,
So
sometimes I don't know whether it's ignorance or they just intentionally lie. But
no, I mean, let's be realistic. Okay, if the airport in India, which is many times the size of RIA, could set up something for $10 million to power themselves. But let's just take a broader, more common sense look at electricity in Liberia and how something like this a model could be a catalyst. So let's say they get the $23 million. And that $23 million allows them to build a 12 megawatt power plant at RIA. RIA itself would probably not use more than 3 megawatts. But what does that mean for the rest of the Marshall area? Right?
Significant impact.
It means that those people will also have access to power. Now, let's look at a development strategy. Let's say you got a large company coming in to do mining operations or something that requires them to use electricity to get to the end product. You can sit down and do calculations and say, how much electricity do you think you're going to use a year? Okay, so let's just take a number and say, oh, I think I'm going to use, 500 kilowatts.
500 kilowatts.
Okay.
More than that. But let's
say that. What is your cost in fuel for that? Because
any day you do that comparative analysis, it better.
But let me tell you where I'm going with this. Let's say you say, okay, what is your cost in fuel? Because you have to transport the fuel to run your generators where you are. So, as a part of our national infrastructure plan, what we're going to say is your 3-year cost in fuel, 50% of that needs to go to a solar farm that will serve you. You understand what I'm saying?
Very much so.
Okay, so now you're getting money to put solar in a location that will not only provide solar for the plant, but it will also provide solar for the surrounding areas. Anybody, for example, who comes to build a new building, what is going to be the power consumption of this building? Okay, you're going to have to put so much money, right, aside for the national grid. Let's jump back to 2014 when Ellen Sirleaf left Rwanda. She signed a contract, an MOU, with Gigawatt Global. Gigawatt Global is the same company that built that solar plant in Rwanda. So there's an MOU in place somewhere to build a 10 megawatt facility in Liberia with the same company. So when I hear the government and Twain and then talking about what Ellen didn't do, that's why Ellen dragged them the other day. Because she left some of this stuff there.
Ellen embarrassed
and you people have done nothing with it.
You see, that's the thing. Every time we say there's continuity in government, from one government to the next, it continues. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be that way. Well, since this new republic that we're looking at today, it doesn't seem to be that way because people want to come and reinvent the wheel or to do their own things.
Because they want to spend too much time discrediting the previous government. But okay, fine. We admit that there are things that Ellen didn't do. We agree. But you know what Ellen did? You know what she did?
What?
She left a signed MOU for you dumbasses to go and take a look at. But you have the paperwork.
George, the question is, did they even review the transition notes? Okay.
I doubt it.
Did they even have substantive transition meetings? I know I went to one or two. And there was no real pushback. There was no attempt to get a solid benchmark of where this government was, or solid baseline of where they were and how to move this country forward. It wasn't there.
Zero.
On paper, you look at a PAPD, the Pro-Poor Agenda for Prosperity and Development, it's decent. But when you come to actual application and implementation, it's just being lost. I don't even know that what they're doing today follows that PAPD at all, because it's like selective development, or or have boutique development, or just cosmetic development. That's what we're on.
It's cosmetic.
It's
cosmetic, and it's crisis based. Okay,
right.
Liberia's development plan is what we call the squeaky wheel plan. Okay, you don't have an overall plan to build the country. Whatever's not working today, that's where you will focus. And then you will move to the next thing that's not working. But you don't have an overarching plan to move the country forward.
And we've discussed this plan before. We believe a national development plan needs to be legislated. That includes a full infrastructure plan, a full agriculture plan, a full economic plan. Unfortunately, nobody wants to do that hard work, George. Why is it we have so many quote-unquote intellectuals and we can't get to do the grunt work that's required for development?
Because intellectuals don't know how to do grunt work. It's never been what intellectuals do. Okay? The difference here is this. In the United States, the intellectuals set the policy. Then they get out of the way and allow their technocrats to do the work. Okay? So I'll give you an example. In the 1990s, the late 1990s, I worked as a consultant with USIA. In Liberia, it's USIS. Mm. And USIS had this thing, they have this thing called a country plan that they put together every 2 years to say, these are the development projects we want to do around the world.
They still doing it.
Okay. So
consistency.
They called me, and I was already on contract with them. And they said, listen, we got this thing, the country plan, we do it. And every year they send us, every mission around the world sends us their country plan. And some of these plans will be 200 or 300 pages.
Yes, easily.
Okay. And then we have to have analysts sit and go through the plans to see how we can match resources to make it best. Okay. My mission then, talking directly to the guy who was the director of USIA, was how do we create an electronic country plan to make the process more efficient? And I built the first electronic country plan for USIA. All of those people submitted their plans as data. Okay? We could then work through the data to see, let's say, West Africa, Liberia, they want to push women in government. They say, okay, we got this plan in Liberia. We want to do this program in Liberia. We also want to do it in Sierra Leone. We also want to do it in Senegal.
How can you get economies of skill?
We can have a bigger picture, and we can send one guy on a 2-week trip to go from Senegal to Sierra Leone to Liberia to Ghana, as opposed to sending a guy to Liberia, sending him back to America, sending him back to Sierra Leone. But that's what that system did for them. But my point is this. The only thing the policymakers knew was they wanted to make the process more efficient.
Right.
They came to us, the technocrats, and say, how do you do it?
And you see, that's one of the major differences between how we approach things in terms of solutions and how people in the Western world do. There's no intimidation or fear of that competent, qualified technician or person taking your job or making you feel stupid because you really don't know what they know. But when we come in our setting, there seems to be some level of trepidation or intimidation with people who are knowledgeable about things and who come to the table with ideas and suggestions and actual experience of implementation. How do we change that mindset?
Well, this is one of the things I think we have struggled with. And one of the things I say is you can have a Liberian who is walking on the street with his 10 toes on the ground today. You make that person minister. Next week, he becomes the expert at everything. And he believes that he knows everything. The things that are required for government to work, you have the high level policies, national policies that can be developed by your master's and PhD holders. They are not the ones who have to do the work, the implementation, the actual design of the plan. And the problem that we have is in Liberia, these intellectuals can't get out of the way. Let's get back to the electricity and the LEC issue and Sam Jackson's solution. His solution was a weak academic solution that said, oh, you know what? LEC can't collect money from all the people it's selling electricity to. So let's pass those costs on to smaller people and we just diversify the debt and everybody will owe everybody and LEC will never get paid. But that's not a solution. The problem LEC has is they don't have a reliable way to bill people for their sale of electricity. So what are we looking at? We are looking at a technical problem. You don't need an economist. And I'm willing to tell you guys that everything Sam Jackson said about the solution to LEC was bullshit with a capital B. Everything.
Well, you're not alone. You're not alone. Most people believe that. Even his cousin, Chris Neal, that he was trying to use as a reference point, made it clear that what he was saying is nonsense.
It's nonsense. But the problem is they won't get out of the way. So when I said to Sam Jackson, we need to start doing all these things, he said, we don't have time. Well, guess what? It took 6 months from the day the people at Chonin Airport signed a contract to the day they turned the solar lights on. It took them 6 months. How much time do we not have?
Because that was clearly defined. For example, tell me, how did they come up with the $23 million that they're talking about today? They just had the issue. They just went over there 3 days ago. Several ministers, President Weah sent them to review the issue. And then they come from there and present and say we need 20 to 23 million. How do they get that number out of the thin air? What is the construct of that number? But you will hear them say, oh, we're already doing steady. For nearly 1 year, we've been doing steady. And which it's a lie. Show me the trail. Everything has a paper trail. Show me the exchanges between those who are developing the study, those who are trying to get the estimates. Then we can talk. But this government is not transparent. If this was a clear process that they are being behind, let them share that process. Let's see where they are going. What kind of scoping they did? What kind of feasibility study they did? What are the estimates specifically for this project?
How much
time frames?
How much more electricity needs to be generated to support the power requirements of RIA?
And are they even looking forward? Because according to her, it's just one little terminal, Yes, RIA can be expanded, but for now is what we have. And even when you go there, the occupancy at this point is not up to the level it should be because people are not traveling as much. So there's still room for that building to maintain, and there's still room for expansion.
Even if you said you want to build a 3 megawatt solar plant, you can do it in 6 months. You can do it at very low cost. So my question is, you're telling airlines right now, don't come after dark. Isn't it a priority that you light your airfield, your airport? Isn't that your priority?
And that's the face of the nation, especially in a year where we're celebrating the 200 years of the arrival of the free slaves. So what preparation was made towards this celebration?
Zero.
And that's
So
a
it
fact,
just
George. Because for the
it
last
just
4 or 5 years, Dr. Clarice Ford Kula and some other folks have been working to make this a success. The government has been like more like a staller in the process than a partner in the process. But after they heard one U.S. congressman, senator, or somebody said, "Oh, when they came to visit like last year, sometime, about August, Liberia should celebrate the 200, the bicentennial of the arrival of free slaves." Then all of a sudden, it became a government project. But they were not prepared. The year of the return in Ghana was not a 1 year thing. No, they took several years of planning. They took several years of building up specific sites, marketing what Ghana had before people came in. That's why they were able to make 1 billion. Today, if you ask the Liberian government, this is the first quarter of this bicentennial. What have you achieved? How many visitors have you had for this bicentennial? What the revenue that you have collected? How do you think it has impacted your economy? They can tell you.
All right, so there's somebody on the thing called Ambassador S. Jimmy.
I was going to get to his question, but say you got it.
One thing about Liberia, I like everybody's an ambassador. Okay,
that's another
so
thing. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to put myself there as ambassador. Whatever
Ambassador
the hell
George
you want to call me. Yeah, but here's the thing, Jimmy. Okay, you can't do it without the infrastructure. Let me tell you guys a little story.
No. But let's start from the beginning, George. Let me share what Jimmy says on the screen. Jimmy said, "Please, we can rebuild Liberia from the U.S., but we can build Liberia, what? LR on the ground. We have heard many people come up here and explain from A to Z and no result." So I don't know if Jimmy understands what's needed to rebuild Liberia.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, Jimmy.
No, he
you
doesn't.
do your little business, you hiring 3 or 4 people. For you to even get that business registration, it probably took you some time. For
It's
you to
inefficient.
effectively pay your taxes, it took you some time.
It's
We
inefficient.
have a unique identifier for each one of your employees. Jimmy, there's some things that are requisite for nation building that are not in place in our country today. So yes, you're doing positive things, and every Liberian can just come and do positive things. But how you coordinate those positive things, that the resource mobilization on the ground with regards to taxes is efficient and effective and can benefit Liberians, that infrastructure, that network is not there.
Let me try to put a bow around this thing and get better and give Jimmy a better appreciation. Every modern economy, without fail, every single modern economy, every Asian tiger economy, okay? Everybody knows what the Asian tiger countries are. Those countries who have just quadrupled their GDP over the last 20 years.
And those countries that Liberia was ahead of.
Right. Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya. All of those countries have one thing in common. They all have a national identification number. Okay? Now, let me try to give you guys a solid understanding of what a national identification number will actually do for Liberia and the Liberian economy. The first thing it will do is it will allow us to transition from a cash economy to a credit economy.
Yes.
Okay? It gets really expensive when you have to spend cash for everything. The reason you can't have a credit economy in Liberia is because the people who would lend you money cannot tell the difference between John Flomo and Flomo John. Those are 2 different people. Only the national identifier can distinguish between those 2 people. Okay? So, here in the United States and every modern economy, people have a national identification number. That means those people get to open bank accounts. They get brought into the formal economy. This is one of the things that You talk about, again, economist Sam Jackson talks about we need to bring people into the formal economy. You can't bring
do that if you don't have.
You can't bring Hawa Massaquoi from Cape Mount and Hawa Massaquoi from
the same Cape Mount.
You can't bring them into the formal economy if they have the same name.
No, you can't.
You have to be able to distinguish between them. Okay, so now you take that national identification number and you tie it to property records. So now I know that Ambassador Jimmy owns a piece of property in Marshall. When you go to the bank to ask them to borrow money, they can type in that information and boom, your information shows up. It also shows up how you pay your debts. You can't grow this Liberian economy at all beyond where you are if you don't put that system in place. Because I don't care which economist you call, any economist that tells you you can do it, you tell him, George Fambula says that you are an idiot. Okay? You are an idiot and nobody should listen to you.
No, George, the thing is, the same tax base that they have today is not being expanded. They're overtaxing people and they're finding different ways to tax the same people that they can identify.
They're asking people to pay taxes in advance. Okay? So who wants to do business in a country where I got to pay you 3 years for taxes that I may or may not owe you, whether or not my business is just as profitable in the same over that period of time? What's the incentive?
There's no incentive. There's no incentive. Even right now, the negotiations they're having, they're crying about.
You people worry about why Liberians are not owning the economy? You know why we're not owning our economy? Very simple. Very simple. We don't have in place the infrastructure to lend money to Liberians.
The access to capital is limited.
The people who are coming in and building, they're bringing in their own capital. They have their own sources of capital outside of the Liberian banking system. So the only thing
right in Liberia too. Summer is right in Liberia. The only thing
Liberians are left to do is to lease their property to foreigners for 20 and 30 years.
Or you got to take a loan where you're paying probably 15 to 17%. And you gotta give somebody a kickback on that loan.
You pay. So this is my last understanding of borrowing money for construction in Liberia. It's a 40% loan to it's a 60% loan to value, meaning you have to put up 40%, and the mortgage term is only 5 years.
5 years.
Okay. Now, people want to beat up on the Liberian banks and say, oh, no, but guess what? It's not the banks. You know what the banks are actually doing?
We can take 6 months to build.
But here's the thing, Isaac. What the banks are doing is they're pricing in their risk, because the bank has no way of proving that you are the definitive owner of that property. They don't, because the government lacks a property record system. So the bank is saying, well, guess what? If you're willing to put 40% into this project and pay us in 5 years, we'll give you the loan. Because if Moba Yobo comes in at year number 4 and say this property is actually mine, we've already collected 4 years of the money. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Whereas in a country where you had existing property records, guess what? 30-year mortgage with 90% loan to value. So you want to build a $200,000 house, all you have to put down is 20%, and you get to pay for that over 30 years. You want to buy a car that costs $50,000? Guess what? Because they can rate your credit, they want you to put down 10%. So that's $5,000, and guess what? You're paying $450 a month for your $50,000 car. So think about those things. Now, in the large scheme of things, let's talk about what that would do for the Liberian economy.
Okay,
First thing it
hold
would
on
do.
1 second. I'm adding to the stream Mr. Percy Harris. George, I know you know Percy, right?
I know this guy, man. Percy, how are you?
Hey, Georgie, how you coming on?
How you been?
I'm good, man. Nice to hear from you again.
Okay, man.
Percy, I know you are listening. So before George redirects to what he was just about to talk about, if you want to come in and just kind of give a little synopsis or your thoughts on what we've already been talking about, you can go ahead.
Look, listen, the reason I call in is because between me and you, I'm a disciple of this message, right? George spoke one afternoon while I was still a young analyst at JP Morgan. I found a free time, and he schooled me on this thing. And I mean, and since that time, I'm a believer in that. But here's my question: the reason I came on was to ask George, right? The idea you talked about are all essential. Like, I just want to know what you think a time frame, right? Say for a government or people, what do you think the time frame for implementing what you are suggesting, just in terms of the infrastructure, right? The things that we need to make the economy work, to make people, to bring people into the real the real economy, right?
Right.
What I mean, just as the expert on this, like, what time frame will you give that? A decade?
So
Half a decade?
no, not a decade. Okay, I would give it 3 years, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
We're having an election in Liberia next year, right? When the ECOWAS team came after the last election, what was the number one solution they recommended to the NEC? Biometric identification.
Biometrics, yeah.
Yes.
Right? How many eligible voters do we have? 3 million, 3.5 million?
Just
Probably
around there.
Probably 4.
Okay. In a country of 4.5 million people.
5 million people.
Okay, so in a country of 5 million people. So, and where the vast majority of the people in Liberia are under 30 years old. Okay?
So guess what? The average age for voters is like 35 to going towards 40. So even the young people are not registering voting.
But let's look at it this way. So the NEC has come out and said, I think they want something like 70, because they don't never cost more money. They want $70 million to prepare for this election. And I'm saying, wait a minute. We're talking about the same thing, right? So if you're going to give the NEC, if the NEC wants to convince us that for an election next year in November, they can do biometric registration for 3.5 million Liberians. No, but you understand what I'm saying, Percy? That's what they're saying. So when you talk about how long it would take, so let's say it would take twice as long. Let's say it would take 3 years. But at the end of the day, here's the problem that I have. The NEC is not in the identification business.
No.
That's not their mission.
No.
They are in the voter registration business.
Yeah.
They are in the business of registering people who have already been identified. Now, we have a national identification authority that has no budget. So they can't complete their mission. Okay? What should actually happen is that money, all monies for identification,
should go to the National Identification.
Should go to the National Identification Agency. Doesn't matter where you are. If you're in agriculture, you got to identify people. If you're at the University of Liberia,
everybody needs to be identified. Period.
Everybody who needs to be identified, that money needs to go to the National Identification Agency. And the National Identification Agency becomes what we call, when I used to work at Boeing, a shared services agency.
Yeah.
They provide services to other organizations in the government.
In the same framework within the government, yeah.
So, for example, guess who else needs biometrics? Foreign affairs, for passports.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody got to do that.
Immigration also, right?
Immigration,
It
correct.
solves a lot of problems, right?
But the agency that needs to do it is the National Identification Agency.
That will have the record of truth for everybody.
So, here's the next problem. The bureaucracy is stifling this whole process because NASCORP has to, by law, identify every person in the country.
Yeah.
Every person who is a contributor to or a beneficiary of Social Security. So if they have to identify George Fambula in the country, they also have to register my wife because she is going to be my beneficiary and my 2 kids. Okay? So as a part of NASCORP's mission, they have to identify everybody. We accept that, right?
Yes.
So what do we need to do to fix this? What we need to do to fix this is we need to roll up the National Identification Agency that doesn't have a budget into NASCORP.
Yep.
Let them become the identification arm of NASCORP and by default, by extension, the government. So everybody gets a Social Security number, right? NASCORP has the data, and NASCORP makes that data available to people. When you talk about the National Election, NEC, what does NEC need? NEC needs what we call in database a data view of every person who will be eligible to vote in the next, who will be 18 or older by the time the next election comes around. That's all they need to build their system. The problem is that because it's NASCORP's primary function, they get to maintain that information. They get to manage the infrastructure to share that data with the rest of the entities that need it, whether it's banks, whether it's the Sendra, the people who do property records, they get to do that. If we take all of this money and give it to the NEC is not in the business of maintaining those records for the other purposes that they are needed.
And other than
the NEC is a consumer.
Other than the data requested, how much was going to identification?
I don't know, but I know I wouldn't give them $5.
And now that he said, and now that George put it that way in terms of the politics, this is why we always complaining about fraud in our elections, right? Ballot stuffing, because we don't know who is who. Anybody can fill out any ballot and put it in there. I mean, if you did so in America, like in George State, Arizona, I don't know if you still live in Arizona and George, but like the recon that went on there, right? They were able to piggyback off of what the machine did. They were able to identify those hand count were able to identify the individuals that actually cast those ballots, right? But if you even wanted to go further, you can even trace those people, right, via the very system you're talking about. What are these are real people, where they live, with addresses and whatnot. So it goes a long way.
Even the dead people, they track the dead people.
That's what I'm saying.
Dead people. So you, with data, with systems, you are able to track all of this stuff.
Yeah,
you're registered to vote. I'm registered to vote. When I moved from one county to another, I filled out my voter registration. And the only thing they asked me for was the foundational data to support who I identified myself as. And here's how they get to that foundational data. They ask you for your driver's license number in the state. Okay? But the driver's license number with the DMV is actually tied to your social security number.
Yes, it's tied to your
That's your foundational identifier. You understand what I'm saying?
And the reason it went to the DMV is because to know whether or not you are actually within the state.
The voter registration people in your state are not the people who maintain and identify you. They only use the data that has already been constructed by the Department of Motor Vehicles.
So, Josh, people say...
You see what I'm saying?
Like some people will say, oh, Liberia is in America. So, how do you understand our mindset when we are supposed to be moving towards development? Yes, we are not there yet, but people keep saying, "Oh, Liberia, America," or "You can't do this, you can't do that." How do we explain to some of these limited people who cannot see beyond the current state of limitation, our inability to even get economic data to analyze properly
So
to
here's
move
the
the
thing.
country forward? Population data for our studies, we can't even get it. Election data, we can't even get it. To really control our immigration, our borders, we don't even know who's in our country.
Well, not even just the borders, healthcare, crime, right? Those things
Okay.
go a
Everything,
long way.
every sector depends on data.
Everything. Okay. So let me give you an example. But I want everybody who can hear my voice to take this one thing from this conversation today. Every problem that Liberia faces, every problem we face has been solved somewhere in the world before. There is nothing unique about the problems Liberia faces.
So why do our
Nothing.
people like to act like our country different?
Okay.
Is it a level of
If we
influence
claim that there is something unique, then we must be retarded. Because they are solving these problems everywhere in the world. You say you have power problems at RIA. Guess what? Somebody solved that problem at an airport in India 8 years ago. You say you have problems picking up trash. Guess what? People are solving that same problem in Ghana. How is it that we are the only people who these solutions exist for, and we don't seem to be able to utilize them?
Because
what is it about us that is so unique?
Our people eat the money, or they prioritize wrong.
Because then the only answer is that we are retarded. Because the answers are there. You know, it's like, you know, when we're in high school and they say open book test. If you fail the open book test, you're retarded. That's the only thing. Yeah, we are going to do an open book test on chapter 6. Chapter 6. I'm going to ask you 8 questions. And the only thing you got to do is you got to read chapter 6. As a matter of fact, you can even open the book and look. Right? You can open the book and look for the question and you still miss 4 of the 6 questions. You just got to be stupid. And I'm sorry. You know, I know a lot of people are going to be offended. But come on, folks. You're talking about 200 years. Or how many, 150 years?
It's 200 years of existence, 170 some years of independence.
You know? So how do we solve how do we solve these problems? We need people who can do who can understand what the heavy lifting is. Isaac, I want to go back to the guy who talked about the business. So in the United States,
because a lot of people have that mindset that Jimmy has.
In the United States, the federal government has something called a Prompt Payment Act. Okay? The Prompt Payment Act says that the government must pay its vendors within 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But it goes even further. It says that if a vendor offers the government a discount to pay before 30 days, it doesn't say the government may. It says the government must accept that discount and pay before 30 days. So let me tell you how it works. So you look at the government of Liberia and all the Liberian people who try to provide services to the government. It takes the government 18, 20 months, maybe 2 years to pay them. You can't run a business like that and be successful. Here's where the Prompt Payment Act helps small businesses in America. I send the government a bill, an invoice that's approved for $20,000. But I give them a 2% discount. Okay? And there's an accounting thing that says 2, 10, and 30.
Yeah.
I'll give you a 2% discount if you pay me in 10 days.
Yeah.
or if you don't pay me in 10 days, you don't get the discount. You have to pay me in 30 days. And after 30 days, you have to pay me interest. Okay? So now let's think about this in the Liberian context. You are going to be paid in 10 days. But maybe you need money today. There is an entire industry of financial services in the United States that is built around that, and it's called factoring. Okay? I submit my invoice to the government for $20,000, right? I'm gonna give them a 2% discount. Well, to me, 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but when you talk about a government that's spending $1 trillion, 2% of $1 trillion is a lot. So now, a factoring company comes in and says, George, guess what? We will give you 80% of your invoice today. And in exchange for that, when the government pays you in 10 days, we'll take 3%. Okay? So I can get 80% of my $20,000, which is about $16,000 today, on the day I submit the invoice. The financial services company is going to make 3%, but they're going to get paid in 10 days. Because you know what? They're sure that the government is going to pay me. Because the government has already said they're going to pay me. Okay? When I submit the paperwork, when the check is cut, it's sent directly to the financial services company. It's not sent to me. And they send me the money. So think about that small businessman that needs to meet payroll this weekend, right? Think about that small businessman that needs to purchase supplies for his business.
But George, again,
he can get access to his money, George, literally.
You talk about a system that will pay. In Liberia, for the people to even process your payment, you got to pay them to get your money for the service you provide for them.
And again, it's because we don't have the systems that even adequately identify who is owed, when they submitted an invoice, okay, and how that invoice is supposed to be satisfied.
I know recently they've been talking about paying domestic debts too. That was a whole different issue. They have a whole.
Okay, but this is what we're talking about right here. We're talking about domestic debt.
Right.
Not foreign debt, domestic.
We're talking about domestic debt. So you want to grow the Liberian economy? Pay the people that you owe. Because those people can now expand their business. You can build financial services around the fact that, listen, I'm not saying the government got to pay you in 10 days, right? Let's say the government said we'll pay you in 45 days. As long as they guarantee that they will pay you in 45 days, somebody will build in the infrastructure and the pricing to make maybe 40% of that money available to you immediately, instead of 80%.
And that's a whole,
you understand? That's how financial services work. So when I hear these people talking about, oh, how we want to grow the economy, how do you think all these little people in America can provide services to cleaning services to their local government? Right?
Again, George, a lot of this, like you said before, you know, George can say some things. You say if somebody has not owned a home, there's just so many, they don't understand how things work, even when they
yeah. You know, one of the things I used to joke up with Isaac, and I said, if I ever become president of Liberia, I would never hire somebody who has never bought a home. And the reason is, here's the difference. When you buy a home in America, it changes your relationship with government in a very fundamental way. All right? Check this out. When you live in an apartment, you know, you take your trash to the trash chute if you live in New York. If you live in a place with townhouses, you take your trash to the dumpster. Somebody comes and picks up that trash, and you don't even see where it goes.
Nope.
You don't care where it goes.
Some people never go to the site.
You understand? When you buy a home, the first thing you're going to find out from the HOA is trash pickup day is on Tuesday. Okay? And the next thing you're gonna find out from your wife is you didn't take the trash out on Tuesday.
George,
Okay?
let me see if I can show them. Trash day was. You see my trash?
You had a trash can there?
No, my trash can.
You see the black trash can? So you're gonna find out from your wife real quick. You didn't take the trash out. Now guess what? We're gonna have 2 weeks worth of trash in the house.
Hey, when you miss one day.
You miss one day. Okay? Liberia is not unique. If you go on the internet, you look for sanitation workers strike in Naples, Italy. It looks like Liberia right now.
Right.
When the sanitation workers went on strike and they didn't pick up any trash.
Because trash is something that don't disappear. If you don't pick it
doesn't
up,
disappear.
it will pile up.
Okay? These people had trash that was 10 feet high because they weren't picking it up. What is it about Monrovia that in all the years we've had a city government, we've never developed a reproducible mechanism to collect and distribute the trash? Let me give you an example about something we discussed about 20 years ago. You see all these boys on Pampan? The government of Liberia, the city of Monrovia, can invest in, you know, the quad ATVs they got?
Yes.
The quads.
Yes.
Okay? Some of them you can put a trailer hitch on the back of them. Okay? You have a city dump and you have these guys picking up trash, taking it to the city dump or to the nearest depository.
George, they have some of them. It's just not effective. They have some of them doing some of that. They got the community trash people. They got the tricycle with the stuff on the back. But again, it's about systems. It's about organizing. It's about sensitizing the people, educating them, the responsibility for their trash. And some of that has not been done, or most of that has not been done.
But Isaac, even the receptacles that they build to hold the trash, the government doesn't pick up the trash on a regular basis.
No, that's the system, that's the order, that's the consistency.
Right.
All of that is missing. And there is no reason why it should get there, because look, every day, Monrovia, they're doing parking tickets. They're hustling from the people, the city tax for different businesses and everything. There has to be a way that they can be accountable for that revenue and be able to leverage that into providing services for the people.
I mean, what do you guys think about a centralized structure too, right? Because some of this comes with accountability, right? Where George lives, probably he has a mayor or a county administrator or something along those lines. The president of America does not know about trash in George community. So sometimes, with all George is saying, sometimes I think about a centralized structure too of government, right? So everything is so centralized, right? That's where you don't have anything happening in the rest of the country. In Monrovia, you see all the actions.
But other parts of Liberia
is happening in the rest of the country, right?
Other parts of Liberia are cleaner.
I agree,
that's because they don't have the population,
right? There's not much activity going on there, so that would be
so Percy,
also.
Percy, what you're talking about is a larger conversation. Because we've heard the people in Liberia talk about decentralization, and none of them knows what it means.
That's a separate conversation.
They don't know what it means.
Because
what we need to do, what you're talking about, Percy. So let me just throw this out here. People talk about decentralization. Let's elect mayors. Let's elect superintendents. Guess what? If the superintendent is paid from Monrovia, you can elect him from now until the cows come home. If I don't like him and I'm the president, I'm just not going to pay him.
But
that's what they do.
But that's what this decentralization entails, right? Electing your local leaders so that they are beholden to you.
No, that's the facade of decentralization.
No, that's the administrative part of decentralization.
Decentralization is actually for each of the political subdivisions to be economically independent from the central government.
To run their own economies. Or some portion goes to the federal government or the national government, but
the way Liberia is structured with 15 counties, it can't work. Because there are only 8 people that live in River G, and I know 2 of them are here.
The people are going to have problem with you for saying that, though. The River G people are going to have problem with you.
Asuku is one of them.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you on this phone. When they talk about voting in Liberia, when they talk about the numbers in Maryland, it's not one of the smaller counties.
Yeah.
But do you know the Grobo are like the third largest tribe in Liberia?
Yeah, that's because the division of the country.
But exactly. So people don't stay in the county because there is nothing there. That's why they have to leave. So the whole concept of this decentralization that we're talking about has to come with decongestion of Monrovia and incentivization for people to go into the counties and do certain things. And those
No, and I totally agree with that. And you can't have this. George is saying all these things, and those comes with that's the infrastructure part, and the administrative part also is what I worry about, but also the revenue part of things, right?
exactly.
All right.
People pay taxes, and everything go to government. Nothing. Then the government
everything goes to Monrovia.
Everything goes to Monrovia, not government. Government can still be decentralized.
Everything goes to Monrovia. So let's look at it this way. Let's say, and I had put out a plan for decentralization about 20 years ago. And what my plan for decentralization said is we would divide the country into 3 provinces.
Joe had a map and everything. Joe had his own map, everything.
We would have a Western, we would have a Central, and we would have an Eastern. The number one thing for each province is it must have its own access to the sea. Everybody must have their own seaport. So we got a port of Buchanan, we got a port we got Freeport of Monrovia, and we have the port in Sino. So we can break the country up into 3 political provinces. Wait a minute, we're not going to do anything with the number of elected representatives because we still keep the same political districts.
I agree.
See what I'm saying? Those political districts are population based.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We keep the same number of senators. Okay.
Yes.
So if we got 30 senators, we're going to have 10 senators per political district. So that's not going to change. But what we're going to be able to do from there is we're going to be able to say that the revenue that comes from logging in Grand Gide, okay, goes to where the logs can be processed in Sino and then shipped out of the port. That revenue, the majority of it stays in the eastern, the eastern portion, the
southeastern portion, yeah.
Okay, and they get to use that to support the administrative organizations. You see what I'm saying?
I agree.
So if the superintendent of the southeastern area is elected, the president can't fire him.
Nope.
Okay. But the other thing that it also does, for those people who are political scientists, they can weigh in on this. What it allows us to do is to filter up competent people for national governments.
I agree.
You understand?
I agree.
Right now, every joker who committed fraud in America is running for president in Liberia.
Oh man.
Okay, and we got that, and we know this because we have pictures of their arrest in an orange jumpsuit. You don't know anything about you. You come throwing money away. You're a damn Medicare fraudster, and you say you're running for president of Liberia.
Call the knee now. Call the knee and let me.
Well, but you understand what I'm saying? What it will allow us to do is we'll be able to look at the Southeast and we'll say, okay, this guy was superintendent there. These are the things he did. That's how he grew the economy. And when it comes time to run for president, we'll have people who are actually competent, who have done things.
George, let me pause for a second because sometimes, some people make comments out of ignorance and we got to share information for people to see. So I want to go to our population census back in 2008. Can you guys see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Not very legible, but I can see.
Yeah, I will zoom it. Okay, this is the population by tribal affiliation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you go up here, the Grobo people, I was just saying the Grobo people are the third largest tribe. This column down here, the Grobo people, There are 300. The group people right here, 176,000, right? Now this is by sex and affiliation. This is the wrong one. Let me find the right one that shows them. All right. So you can see the Pella people, the largest tribe, 705,000. Can you see that? All right. The next largest tribe that the Bassa people, 466,477. This is from 2008. But projected forward, the Grebo people are still the third largest. The Gio people were 276,923. The Manon people were 273,439. And the Grebo people, 348,758. So when we talk and people don't understand, they should ask questions or they should go do the research. Because that's our population there. And projected forward today, they're probably 400,000. Because back then we were like 3.8 million people. Now we're about 5.1, 5.2 million people. So when people don't know the statistics and they don't know the growth rate of our population or they break down by ethnic affiliation, they should be able to learn.
But this conversation, George, and us we having here, it goes to the root of Liberia, right? That means like it's like restructuring Liberia as we know it. I mean, in terms of
that's the topic. Restart Liberia. How do we start off, Percy? Because we cannot continue with this progression and be able to have a developed Liberia. There is no way we can move forward if we don't have the fundamentals in place. And people can say, "Oh, you're in the diaspora, you're talking that." No, the people in Rwanda, the people in Ghana, the people in Botswana, the people in South Africa, they are building these systems. Look at how far back we are when we come to financial technology. Do you think if we have payments, automated payment system where people will identify, the government won't get a tax every time you go do any transaction, you buy a bitter ball, the government
will get 2 cents.
2 cents or 1 cent.
They will get 2 cents. You ride a pen, they will get 2 cents. You ride the bus, they will get 2 cents. Guess what? Then you that's how you expand your tax base. And I listen to these idiots who call themselves
something going on with
the damn thing.
Something going on with George. I don't know if it's me or
oh no, it's probably you because we stay here, George. Yeah, so we want this to be like a 1 hour to 1 hour 30-minute show. It's gonna be continuous every Wednesday. Today, just to recap, we touched on the fundamentals in terms of what we need to build this country, and we'll go from sector to sector. We'll be asking experts from different sectors, and it's good for us to disagree and bring diverse viewpoints to the table.
But Isaac, I just sent you a copy of that map.
Okay,
that I put together.
All right.
So if you can share it with these people.
Oh, you send it by which means?
In Messenger.
Okay. So, the key here is for us to understand that no one person has all the answers to what is Liberia. We need input from diverse people. And, people on the ground, some of them can complain all they want, but trust me, we have some of the best in the world in any area who are Liberians.
Yep.
If we can't recognize the competence of those people to be able to help our country, we're only setting our country back. We need a real diaspora engagement. And some of them, they are so high where they are, they're not coming to Liberia. But if they can just share their insight, or they can just talk to some of the people they work with to put some kind of spotlight on Liberia to solve certain problems, whether it's how you integrate food and healthcare, like folks are doing at Johns Hopkins with that, Cooper lady. Whether it's just how you deal with public health in general. She has significant experience in that. Whether it's electricity. Look, Dr. Lawrence Jones told me way back when this hydro was going on, Ava, that thing will not work. I said, Dr. Jones, what do you mean? He broke it down for me, how we could identify alternative uses of energy for us to be able to get to where we are in a positive way that we can really have consistent, affordable, accessible electricity in our country. And we have not.
And for those of you who don't know who Lawrence Jones is, He's a Liberian PhD electrical engineer. He is on the President's Council.
No,
I
say the president of the United States.
I said President of Liberia Council. He is on the United States of America's President's Council on energy. Okay, so you have to be way up there to be on that President's Council on energy. All right, but those are not the people we bring to Liberia. We bring every fly-by-night person to say, oh, I went to a seminar in Ghana and I'm an expert. So this is where we are.
At least many of them know Antoinette Saye. Some of them don't know Rhoda Weeks Brown.
Here's my thing with the people in Liberia who complain. Okay? If the stuff that you're doing is working, great. I appreciate it. Don't complain to me that you don't have light RIA. Okay? But the stuff that you're doing is not working. Okay? It's not working, and it's obvious that the people there can't fix it. Because here's the thing. RIA is worse today than it was when Ellen left 5 years ago.
Fact.
I don't think anybody can make that argument, can argue against that. All right? That is just a fact.
So yes,
when Ellen was at RIA, the light was not going every day.
So George, you just want to talk us a little bit through your breakdown?
Okay, so I mean, it's very simple, and this is just something I did off the cuff. You know, other people can make their recommendations, but essentially, you know, it divides the country into 3 zones, or 3 provinces, and each of those provinces have distinct economic activity. All right, you have Lofa, you have Bomi, you have Cape Mount, you have Montserrado. Lofa it does a lot of farming. You have the southeast, which does a lot of logging and lumber. Okay, but all of the revenue from those places come to Monrovia, and they're not repatriated to those economic zones to develop them. So let's say we started by putting 2 10-megawatt solar plants in each one of these areas. Grand Jita, for example.
You blow up the country. You make a
Sino, for example. Here's the other thing, and I just want to make this, you know, I would not be doing any more development in terms of infrastructure in Monrovia.
I had a discussion with somebody the other day. Move it to Ziggy.
Why? Because this is why people come to Monrovia, and it's it's what becomes a vicious cycle. The more infrastructure you build in Monrovia, it means you're not building infrastructure somewhere else.
Anywhere else.
And the people from that somewhere else will now come to Monrovia because that's where the infrastructure is.
Yes. Yes.
So if you decide, I'll give you an example. Singapore, it's not Singapore, Indonesia has decided that the capital city, Jakarta, there's nothing they can do to fix it.
Right.
So you know what they're going to do? They're going to a different place. We'll start over somewhere else. Jakarta will be there, but hopefully when we start somewhere else to build a new capital, people will come there. You follow what I'm saying?
And you know, somebody have mentioned, let me stop sharing this. Somebody have mentioned that I said Madam Salif was incompetent and they tried to individualize it. It was Madam Salif government. They were not doing what they expected to do. They themselves failed the people. But the fact of the matter is,
both can be true. Both can be true. They're not mutually exclusive.
That I can agree with. That I can
mutually
agree
exclusive.
With. But
you can say that there are many areas that Ellen was incompetent in, while at the same time there are areas that WIA is incompetent in.
No,
Ellen being incompetent in one area doesn't mean that WIA is competent in that other area. He may even be less competent.
Auntie, the person was making the point that we are competent. What they were saying, WIA is way more incompetent, you know, than where Ellen was. But let's put it on a government basis, because on an individual basis, we know there are limitations to those individuals. But when we look at it government to government, we all question this government is worse, you know. So yes, hopefully, and George, I must also add on that design back in the day, you have roads at vertical and horizontal going across the country and coming down the verticals. So again, it's about opening these economic corridors, building these economic zones, but you can't do these things if you don't have the fundamental underlying systems, especially when it comes to data and it comes to structure. If you don't have it, you're not going to do it. So George, I think we had a good show today. Let's wrap up. Let's try to stick with 1 hour 30 minutes. And then
let's just see what the feedback is and where we go next week.
Right.
But if any one of the government officials want to come on and defend the government, I think they should be allowed to come on.
No. I'm willing for anybody to come, but I don't want this to be a defense thing, right? It's about let's have some mutual conversations on more like policies and direction and roadmap
implementation.
Yes, and how we can implement some of these things.
Because that's one of the frustrations that I get when I talk to people in Liberia. Their thing is, we got that. No, you don't. You got something that looks like what I'm talking about, but the thing you got is only a shell.
But again, we talk about that when we were setting up the LACC and all these things. There's a shell tendency in Liberia. They don't give people the mandate to operate as they should, to go out and do what they can do to wherever that meant. And that's why they for people who don't read the Liberian budget, for each institution, commission, agency, ministry, it has the mandate there. And you can look at that mandate and determine it. So to determine what that agency, that ministry, that commission is supposed to be doing. So we should understand what each entity responsibility is and how they implement it. So all of these things will come to bear. We really, really want more people. You can tell us, you can come on the show, you can discuss your point, but just come with your research well done. You'll be able to make your point as well as being able to inform the people who will be listening. So thank you for coming on, George. You already have some fans. Some people want me give your number to them. Definitely I will share your information. 1 or 2 of them want you to come on their shows. And hey, there's a lot that we can do to share with people, to open their eyes, to expand their knowledge, to explain how we can expand our economy. Look, the Liberian economy is way, 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 way underserved. There is so much potential in our economy, from the agriculture sector, from the mining sector, from the services sector. There's just so many things we can do, from the fishing. Look, Liberia has a lot of potential, and we discuss those things. We break down these different growth opportunities, some of the areas where we think that it should be considered priority growth areas, how it can be done. And like George said, all of this stuff has been done before. It's not new. So all we need to do is customize things for ourselves. So we want to say thank you. Hey, okay, George, the guy's talking me. You can't get tired. We'll talk to you later next week. Actually, no. On Friday, we'll be here with a weekend review where we'll go over the news of the week. And we know we had some serious news this week. And hopefully we'll be able to capture that again, provide that information to you. But Restart Liberia, Rebuild Liberia, Restart Liberia is an important topic that most Liberians need to see how we can get together and find the right ideas and try to implement some of them. The airport that George was talking about, the Cochin Airport in India, it was a public-private venture where the Indian people in 32 other countries outside of India put up the funding to work with the government to be able to build that airport, to build that solar plant. So just it. Richard Bar Allen, thank you. Whole day that man chasing me. Whole day he crying that he want a CDC job to come and stress when I'm having a show. So, we understand. Folks, you have a wonderful day. Later.